Anyway, I'm that fellow who kept pestering you throughout the conference with his questions. So soon it will be your time to extract upon the flesh and take your revenge. But before I commence speaking what I came here to say today, I should sacrifice some time from my presentation and express my heartfelt gratitude. First for being invited here, and then express my deepest respect to all the organizers of this wonderful symposium, to all these who made it possible for us to gather here and speak about what we like the most, namely the 78s. It is an understatement to say that they did an amazing job. And because there are no more adequate words, I believe I will just shut up about that particular.
Mogu te ipak zamoliti da se primakneš samo 15 metara naprijed?
Now I can be heard more clearly.
Yes, you can, Nikola.
Good. It's nice to hear my friend David Pokrajac here. Anyway, I should say that the blind people and the recorded sound have a very long and very fruitful relationship, if one can say that. Even Edison, when he started his phonograph business, if one goes through his paper for the trade, Edison Phonograph Monthly, several times he expressed his hope that his invention, the phonograph, could be used to aid the blind people, particularly when it comes to books and written material that would be recorded. However, we all know that that particular plan did not come to fruition because of the length of material that was possible to be recorded on a cylinder. But later it did develop into a system of so-called talking books, which were very popular, especially throughout the Western Europe. I know of one example of a talking book from Yugoslavia, recorded in Paris in 1938 or 39 at, and I apologize to any French speaker for butchering the language, at Rue de Montevideo 4, that is to say Montevideo Street number 4, where the American Braille Press had its expositor, led by Mr. George Reverett, who was a friend of Veljko Ramadanovic, the first pedagogue for the blind. However, that was the sole example of a talking book from before the war in Yugoslavia, as far as I know. I should mention that it was digitized by our late friend, Milan Milovanovic, to whom I owe much and to whom I dedicate not only this presentation, but every day of my collecting and digitizing the discs, because he and Steven Kozoberic were the two people who inspired me the most to actually digitize my own collection. Now, when it comes to blind collectors of 78 RPMs, there are not many of us, at least not many with whom I am acquainted personally. There may be hundreds of us, but I don't know any of us. There is, of course, my very humble self. Then there is Ward Marston, who is a giant from the US, who actually digitizes and publishes his collection on actual CDs and makes money of it, which I don't, obviously. Then there is Robert Godridge, with whom I'm actually in contact. He is from the UK, and he aided me on a couple of occasions, or more than a couple of occasions, in helping me. He helped me find certain ways and shortcuts when it comes to digitizing discs as a blind person. As I said, there aren't many of us, so I will speak mainly about myself and my own insights and perspectives. Therefore, I should warn you that you should not take what I say here as gospel, because as we say in Serbian and Croatian, koliko ljudi, toliko čudi, as there are as many, how should I say, as many moods and narratives as there are people. For thus, what may be important and true for me may not be for another blind person. However, here are some perspectives and insights that I have personally found. As with everything in life, blindness brings both positives and negatives. Of course, for you as sighted people, most negatives may be obvious immediately. I mean, you can see, obviously. You have to find a way to move around, mobility and things like that. And that directly affects my ability as a record collector to actually collect the recordings, because I have to arrange the meeting places with the possible buyers, or should I say sellers, and me as a buyer have to arrange meeting places in advance, because I can't just go willy-nilly around the city, especially with the lack of traffic culture that is present all over the Balkans. Then also there is a certain amount of trust that needs to be involved in the entire thing. Therefore, I mostly buy my collection over the internet or through personal contact with people. And in this field, particularly when it comes to the records from the USA, I have had a great help from Dr. Dragoljub David Donald Pokrajac, whom I must thank publicly, because I imagine with a great personal expense, he brought me many packages of recordings from the US whenever he visited. So I must thank him again for that. Then, when I actually buy a recording, and when to use the terms of a butcher, when I want to process it, I mean, digitize it and take pictures of the matrix and post it on YouTube, I have to find a victim. That is what I jokingly refer to as a helper, who would help me in taking the picture and maybe dictating the matrix numbers to me, at least the matrix numbers, because they are more important than the catalog numbers when it comes to dating disk. Not dating as in being in a relationship, but dating, determining the date of recording. In that, I'm usually held by my mother, who is my most frequent victim. So I must thank her also. Thankfully, for these past few years, the databases have become more accessible for me as a blind person with a speech synthesizer, especially the Kelly database and the nascent Diskograf project. I owe a very personal debt, especially to Dora Donato, who helped me with dating many Edison Bell Pencala discs. But there are, despite these negative things, there are many positive things, and some of them may be perhaps surprising to you. There are, of course, obvious things, such as the fact that we pay more attention to our sense of hearing. I believe, and I assure you that it is that we pay attention to it, not that we have a heightened sense of hearing. That's it. That is what I believe personally, which helps us when it comes to digitizing the record properly without removing too much noise and thereby ruining the disc, which often happens even to professional producers. Actually, I found that they are they mostly are the ones who do it. They ruin the discs trying to make a girl out of a grandmother, as we say in Montenegro. I personally can differentiate between certain labels and discs through the sense of touch. For example, I will readily recognize a concert gramophone disc because it has a raised outer rim, very prominent, unlike, for example, on raised outer rims of early Odeon, Diadal discs, and other such labels. It is very prominent, very wide, and very noticeable. Then also it has a groove, very pronounced, that leads at the end of the disc towards the label. It can be felt even by a sighted person if I direct their attention to it. Then what I found interesting and what I would like to discuss perhaps with both Philip Scheer and the Croatian people here is that I cannot differentiate between the Yugoton and supraphone label, because to the touch they feel virtually the same, from which I concluded that Yugoton in the 50s bought the machinery that they used from the Czechoslovakians. And I'm glad to have heard some remarks here that actually collaborate what I thought and what I determined just by the sense of touch. Then, of course, the Yugoton label, for example, has a very, very distinctive smell. It smells like naphtha or benzene. And I really don't know what narcotic stuff they use in their shellac, but it really, really gives off a sense of such strong odor that it is impossible to miss. You are able to recognize the Yugoton label by a sense of smell. Now, I should not take too much of your time, but I would like to give a short anecdotal introduction how I came actually to start collecting records. I was a small child, about 5, 6, or maybe even 4, I don't know, as my most frequent victim for details. And I got a certain disease, which is, I think, in English known as measles, in Serbian as male boginje, and in Croatian something to do with kozice, I think. Anyway, that particular disease results in a strong need to scratch oneself, which tends to leave scars afterwards when the disease is over. So in order to prevent me from scratching myself, my father came to a brilliant idea, although I'm sure my mother by now disagrees, to get a gramophone from the attic of my grandmother's house with a bunch of records for me to play with. Of course, those were vinyl discs, and I was content with them for quite a while. And then I, of course, discovered the Speed 78 and asked what was it for, and my father's response was for older records. And I thought, oh, wait, there were older records? And I always had that fondness and love for old and forgotten things and even people. So my first 78s I bought in the USA when I was an exchange student on eBay for $1, $2. And actually, some of them were Croatian. The orchestra of 53rd and 70th Infantry Royal and Imperial K&K Regiment, which I gifted to Dr. Mirnik recently. So those were ones of my first 78s. And then I met Steven Kozobaric, who, as I said, was one of my main inspirations when it comes to digitizing discs. At first, my attempts at digitization were quite amateurish and frankly disgusting. I mean, you should hear that sound. It's horrible. I didn't have the proper equipment. I didn't have the proper programs, but I learned a lot, really a lot from our late friend Milan Milovanovic, and it's really impossible to say how much he transformed my way of looking at and viewing the 78 RPM discs. And then my friend Robert Godrich recommended to me a couple of programs that were accessible. That is to say that the voice software agrees with and works with, such as Click Repair, Isotope, RX10, Audacity, and that is how I started digitizing my own collection. And because I'm such a wonderful person, I opened a YouTube channel and started posting those discs because it felt quite selfish just to leave them for me and let them gather dust and not allow anyone else to listen to it. That was my main objective. And it still is when posting discs on YouTube. And I really do not have any system, nor do I care for nationality. I primarily collect Serbian and Croatian discs, but I also have some Slovenian. Today, they mentioned Mary Udovic and Josefina Lauche. I have one disc, and if I knew you were going to mention her, I would have brought it as a gift to Drago and Rebecca, because I really, yeah, I would have gifted it. But also I collect foreign discs. When I say foreign, I mean non-Slavic. I have one very controversial disc, Mozart Horde Hitlerjugend, with which I don't know what to do. It's sitting quite comfortably in my collection, doesn't complain about being in the presence of Untermenschen, but still, I don't know what to do with it. So that is in brief about my collection and about my motives for opening a YouTube channel. I could talk probably for hours and hours about my day-to-day life as a blind collector. I could tell you many anecdotes about how I carried discs through Belgrade in a backpack, which burst in the end. That poor backpack couldn't handle my appetite for collecting. But I believe that I should leave you some time to extract your pound of flesh, as I said in the beginning, and to take your revenge for me asking all those questions. But before that, in honor of our hosts and of the country in which we are, I would like to propose that we play my digitization of Lijepa naša domovina, the Croatian anthem, from
You're going to stand up again.
1913 by 70th Infantry Regiment, Royal and Imperial Infantry Regiment from Austria and Hungary. With singing, digitized, of course, by myself. Now it is in Dr. Mirnik's collection. May it remain there.
Ready?
Ready. Just an introduction. So, Zvonimir Štrmac and Đuro Prejac, other singers.
Hvala lijepo. Thank you very much.